Believe it or not, my friends, this is the 72nd Solid Signal podcast. And while some of you might be wondering why I chose a number like 72 to tell you instead of waiting until 75 or 100, well, that's just the kind of guy I am. It's the kind of off-kilter stuff that you'll find at the Solid Signal podcast. And I'm not guaranteeing that I won't also celebrate at 75 or 100 or what have you. At any rate, let's get right into it. This is Memorial Day week in 2014, and I hope that as you took the time to head out to your barbecues, out to your beaches, out to your friends' houses, that you also took the time to remember the people who gave their lives so that you can do it. The United States of America is an amazing place, and one of the greatest things about it is it was built on sacrifice. Everything you have today is because somebody gave their lives so that you could have it. Something pretty heavy to think about while you're chomping into that hot dog, but it's worth saying anyway. Also, a special thank you to all of you who sent messages of support due to the fact that I wasn't feeling well last week. I'm back to 100% now, and you know, those messages, those comments, even I got a couple of e-cards, they just really make me feel like what I'm doing out here in the blogosphere is worthwhile. So thanks again very much. As I get a little more comfortable doing the Solid Signal podcast, I always think about that first podcast that I did and how worried that I would be that I would offend somebody. And I know that's not how the internet works, because you know you're always going to offend somebody. But I was kind of timid, and as the podcasts have gone on, I've gotten a little more anxious to give you my full opinion on stuff. And I think those are the podcasts that people actually remember, that they enjoy, and they keep bringing them back to the Solid Signal podcast, and hopefully shopping at solidsignal.com. There's my commercial for the day. This week's podcast is going to be titled something like The Broadcast Apocalypse, and here's the reason. I really strongly believe that 7 to 10 years from now, the broadcast landscape will be very, very different than it is now. Does that mean that there is going to be no television? You turn on the TV and nothing happens? Absolutely not. That's just not the way it works. However, the number of over-the-air channels, the number of pay channels, they may be considerably less, depending on what content providers are willing to do in the next 12 to 18 months. This is a critical time, and it's critical that people have a little bit of common sense when they talk about pricing. When you take out the promotional pricing, the first 2-year pricing that every pay TV provider gives, there's no question that the average user is paying over $100 for television per month. And that cannot go on forever, despite the fact that content providers keep asking for 300% raises. Just flat out ridiculous, folks. When was the last time you got a 300% raise? Because pay TV providers have drawn a line in the sand when it comes to channels like SEC, Pac-12, Sportsnet LA, you're going to see that start to echo. You're going to see prices actually go down, I think, if these content providers want to stay in business, because it's just too expensive. What you're going to see is this kind of accordioning effect. Man, that's hard to say. Anyway, instead of seeing 8 HBOs, you'll see 1 HBO. Why? Because you don't need to show the same thing 8 times. It's available on demand. The same thing with networks like, for example, Bravo. We won't have to have an entire lifestyle network Bravo, because they show a lot of reruns. Instead, there will be a lot on demand, and instead of having 8 Comcast-owned networks, you'll have 1. Maybe that 1 channel will cost 2 or 3 times what a channel used to cost before, but remember, it'll be taking the place of 8 channels, so there should be a little bit more value involved in it. If it doesn't go this way, well, the fact is, people are just going to defect to lower cost alternatives, and no one wins, especially if the FCC doesn't come through with some logical approaches on net neutrality, which is another whole issue, and I'm trying not to talk about that. At the same time, the FCC is planning for something called a reverse auction, which is going to give broadcasters the opportunity to sell back their licenses if they've decided that they can make more money doing that than actually broadcasting. And with broadcast and electricity and talent costs going up, with content provider costs going up to these channels, it's going to get harder and harder for them to turn a profit. And it's expected that a good number of them are going to participate in the first round of this reverse auction, and if there are future auctions, even more will participate. So what should you expect? Just like I said in a previous article where I pointed out that you have more channel selections than ever, but the truth is you're still only watching 17 to 18 of them. In the future, you'll probably have fewer channel selections, but you'll watch a greater percentage of them. There won't be as much repetition, there will not be as much choice, but the choice you have should be better quality. At least let's hope so, because let's face facts. Linear television is a good way to waste a little bit of time, relax after a tough day, and there's some good stuff on there that I just have my doubts that online providers like Netflix are going to be able to afford to keep producing. Linear television is still a good moneymaker as long as it's done rationally. But rationally has to come from these content providers, and I know I always pick on these poor content providers. These content providers who are asking for way too much money. You know, there's a term called flying too close to the sun. It comes from a Greek myth of Icarus, this guy who created wings that made him fly. I remember it's Greece, and they didn't really understand how that worked. He was able to create himself a set of wings, and he started to fly, but unfortunately he flew too close to the sun. And since his wings were held together with wax, well, the wax melted and he fell to earth. I'm afraid that content providers are simply flying too close to the sun if they keep trying to push these massive price increases, and it's going to bring all of linear television crashing right down to earth with them. Anyway, if you've noticed, these podcasts keep getting longer and longer, and I feel like in some way I'm kind of wasting your time, and I'd like to get some feedback from you guys about how long you think a podcast should be. Leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube or at the Solid Signal blog, or just push that orange Suggest a Topic button or Contact Us button at the Solid Signal blog. Until I hear from you, have a great week.